I just got an invitation a few days ago to do a tattoo convention in New York. I think it's just called the New York City Tattoo Convention in May of 2021, which I was excited about. That is a sign that we will be doing conventions again in the fairly near future, I hope, and doing guest spots and going around and working in different parts of the world. And when we do that, it's important that we're able to book, right? When we're at conventions, we don't want to sit at a convention and pay for a booth and not tattoo. We don't want to go and work at someone's shop and take up space and not tattoo. And that is why you need to know about my friends at Tattoo SEO. What they can do that's very unique is they can promote you in any part of the world for a short period of time. So if you're doing a convention in San Diego, California, they can promote you for a month or so leading up to that actual convention and help get you booked. They can also help you more long-term in your hometown by making sure that you show up higher in Google search results when people are searching for the type of work that you do. If you're a traditional tattooer in Atlanta, Georgia, and someone types in Google, I'm looking for the best traditional tattooer in Atlanta area, they'll make sure that your name or your website pops up higher in Google search results. Check them out. Go to tattooseo.com or just click the link in the video description below. They are offering a special for Fireside viewers. They're going to give you a month free to test it out. Now, this is a first come, first serve offer. It won't be available long. So click the link below, check them out, give them a shot. I'm sure you'll be pleased. Okay, so here's a short video that I took of the original Peacock feather whenever we met for a consultation. And you'll see what I do a lot of times, instead of just taking a photo, I'll take a little video of it so I can see just how dark it is. And then here I'm finding kind of a reference point. So here's a tattoo on my arm, and I'm gonna put it up against the Peacock feather just so I can see about how dark it really is. I did a little 3 Minutes to Better Tattooing episode on this, so if you want more information about why I'm doing that, you can go back and check out that video. I'll try to link to it in the show notes, or maybe do some type of little drop in here so you guys can see it. But so I'm starting with kind of a light marker and just seeing what the old tattoo will give me. You know what I mean? Like where the sticking points are going to be, you know, what's dark, what's scarred, where are there some areas that fell out that I can use as highlights. You know, what is the existing shape of the tattoo and what's the shape of the arm, and how can I make the my new version of this tattoo fit the arm a little better. So you can see the first thing that I'm doing here is the way that it fell out was very harsh. It looked almost like porcupine quills or something like that. And it's funny because the tattoo is so heavy down in the lower and skinnier part of her forearm, but then as her forearm gets bigger, you know, going up towards her elbow, it just falls out. And that's really where it should kind of blossom and bloom out, and where I think we can draw some attention. That's something I'm always trying to do is see where I can distract the viewer away from, you know, what's wrong with the tattoo. So in the off chance that I get down into that really heavy stuff down there and I can't really bring it back to life as much as I want to, I want to be able to depend on some other element to draw the viewer's attention away from that area, away from that really dense, heavy area down closer to her wrist. And so one way that I can do that is by, you know, making the tattoo bigger and adding some interest up higher, some lighter areas, some brighter areas. You'll see later I try to get into the eye of the feather there and draw some attention there so that it's less about actually covering up the bad part of the tattoo, although we will do that, but it's less about that and more about distracting the viewer's attention and kind of pulling them to the part of the tattoos that you want them to notice first. So, and you know, you can see I'm kind of making some weird shapes here with this red marker. I want the thing to flow, but I don't want it to be too predictable, you know, like just feathers next to feathers next to feathers that just fan out perfectly. So I'm trying to find a way to kind of, you know, make some like unexpected little twists and turns in the shape of the feathers, you know, have them interact in an interesting way, have them finish out in an interesting way, instead of just being super repetitive. One thing that I think I was thinking of whenever I was laying this out was kind of like an Art Nouveau kind of thing, like if you're familiar with Alphonse Mucha and how the women's hair almost kind of interlocked as these shapes. I was kind of thinking about that. I'm not copying that necessarily, but some of the shapes here I'm trying to think about, like one whip of a feather kind of like melding into a feather that's coming from a different direction, so they create this kind of dynamic shape together. And I'll typically use, a really light marker like that soft purple marker I used in the first place, and then come with something a little bolder like this red, and that still leaves me the option to go with something darker like a purple if I don't get it just right on this one. Although, I'm trying each time to render further and further. So if I remember right, on this tattoo, I got to the end of the red marker and it was enough for me to work from, so I didn't really need to render any further. Trying as I'm laying out, I know that this little eye of the feather is going to be my focal point, one of the areas I'm going to try to use to draw attention away from the cover-up areas. And so I'm trying to add some dimension into it so that it looks like it's kind of coming out and back and not look so flat. So I'm kind of representing that with lines right now. And then as I move down into the really rough areas, I'm paying attention to what is, what's scarred, what is beat up, what's light, what fell out, and how can I use it? How can I create enough detail in the shadow shapes to make it interesting and not make it look like, I just made a bad tattoo a little bit better. Down here at the bottom, they just kind of the original tattooer just kind of let the bottom of the feather fall out. There's really no quill or anything that comes out of it, so I'm going to try to add some little hint of that. I didn't have a lot of room because it's kind of close to her wrist anyway, so I had to find kind of a clever way to hint at the quill of the feather without actually drawing it or tattooing it in. And I don't know if at any point in this video I show my kind of reference drawing that I put together after the consultation to draw this from, but I did photograph this thing and pulled it into my iPad and tried to at least kind of rough out what I thought I was going to do, so I wasn't coming in completely blind and just kind of winging it. I did have some idea of what my plan was going to be. There's just no chance that I could have stenciled it and really lined it up properly. It always makes more sense to, in this type of tattoo, for me at least, to just hand draw it. That way, like I said, I can allow for what I'm finding, as I'm going, like what areas are scarred up, what areas are really dark and in there that I don't want to try to fight. The really dark areas, I want to try to use them as best I can. And then the areas that I, that lend themselves to being covered up or that I could use as a highlight, I'll let those become highlights. That way I'm using the existing tattoo as best as possible and I'm not just fighting against it. This part of the tattoo, it takes some time. I don't know how long I spent drawing on this, but don't ever, let yourself feel pressured. Relax and take your time when you're doing this and consider different options, and don't be afraid to wipe the whole thing off and start over. If I got to this point and I just didn't like the direction it's going, I might have 20 minutes into the drawing, but oh well, if it just wasn't going the right direction, you just have to scrap it and wipe it down and, take the lesson and start it again, and the clients may not love that, but that's just the way that it is. This thing goes out the door with your name on it too, so it has to be something that you feel confident that you can pull off. And so if you get to a point and it's not going the right direction, man, wipe that thing off, start it over. You can see I had a little bit of a negative shape there that the last tattooer had put in that I've really grabbed onto just above the eye there. It almost looks like a little H. My hand's in the way right now, but it almost looks like a little H shape. If I'll get my hand out of the way. Yeah, just above the eye right there. And that's something that I thought, that was in the original tattoo anyways. And that's kind of that Alphonse Mucha thing I was talking about, like these wisps of hair that can kind of connect one shape to another shape and kind of pull your eye through, almost like you're moving through a little puzzle or a little, what do you call it? Like I'm drawing a blank on the, trying to blank on the name, but like a little maze. It's almost like you're moving through a little maze whenever you're looking at Alphonse Mucha drawings, looking at the way that the hair or whatever it is, the filigree kind of interlocks. So here is where we got to with the red marker, and that's enough. Now I know what to do. I kind of know what my shapes look like. It's simple enough that I can break down foreground, middle ground, background if I'm thinking of it that way. What is in the distance will be, light or dark. What's in the midground will be somewhere in the middle, and what's in the foreground will be dark or light, and you just kind of make those separations in your mind. In this case, I'm thinking about what feather is overlapping the other feather, and I'm saying, okay, everything in the background is going to be my darkest darks, and then everything in all the feathers that are in the immediate foreground will be my lightest areas of light, and you're just constantly laying it in, wiping it off, making adjustments, asking yourself if what's working, what's not working, what if I did this, what if I did that. That's something I use a lot. I can't remember who. It was a painter that I first heard say it, but he said he always asked himself, what's working, what's not working, and what if? And so I find myself all the time stopping in my tattoos, wiping them down, stepping back, kind of squinting and going all right, what's working here? What's definitely not working here? And what if I did this? Or what if I tried that? And if you just continually make that like part of that's like your mantra as you're tattooing, you'll find that you're always problem solving. You're always willing to make to change your decision or go in another direction, or, what if what if I went cooler in this area? What if I went warmer in that area? What if I didn't use any lines in that area? What if I made this area super bold? If you don't ask those questions, you end up just doing the same things all the time, and all your tattoos always look the same, which is no fun. So, kind of coming through just with straight black and a, probably like an 7 or 8 liner or something like that, and just kind of sculpting out the areas that I want to pull forward. And at this point, I'm also kind of looking to see like how much darker is the black that I'm using from that settled in black. A lot of times you'll, it's like the moment of truth whenever you go from drawing on the tattoo to actually placing the first bit of black ink over the cover up. And you either go like, oh, sweet, it's so much blacker than the healed tattoo that I'm covering. This is going to be easy. Or you lay your black over it and you're like, oh no, that old tattoo is actually super dark, and this new black isn't going to be any darker at all. So it's definitely like a moment of truth time for me whenever I lay those first few lines down over an old tattoo that I'm covering. I'm always hoping that whenever I lay that black down, it's like super bold and just like it makes the old tattoo look faded and gray. But really, you never know for sure. You think you do, and even using the trick that I was using earlier, where I kind of compare it to my own tattoo on my arm, you can estimate how dark a healed tattoo is, but you really don't know for sure until you start laying ink over the top of it. Start out pretty slow and kind of thoughtful. One reason on this is because it's right there at the bottom of that, where that quill kind of makes its way out, and that's an area that I knew was super important. I needed to finish that off in an interesting way, since it kind of caps out the tattoo, and that really is one of the pieces you're going to see the most, whether she's wearing, long sleeves, short sleeves. I think that this woman is a hairdresser, so everyone's going to see that wrist. I always think about that, like, she's cutting hair and she's got her arm right in front of you as she's cutting your hair, and like the way that tattoo finishes out is super important. So I'm being really careful and kind of like thinking about how this thing is finishing. Are those red lines that I put in there exactly where I want them? How bold do I need this line to be? Do I need to sculpt that little edge up? How much negative space? I think you can see, I've left some negative space right there next to the quill, where I've like whipped some feathers out to the side, and then they kind of cut back into the main mass of the feather, so I've got these little kind of areas of negative space or skin tone that are popping through. I want all that stuff to be just right. So I'm super methodical and patient whenever I'm starting this kind of, whenever I'm starting out tattoos, really when I'm starting out tattoos at all, but specifically whenever I'm dealing with stuff like this. I want to be really slow and make sure that I'm being thoughtful. Another thing that I'm thinking of at this point is, I want to make sure that the lines that I'm laying in are necessary. Like they're the lines that need to be there to describe how those feathers are kind of moving kind of in and out of each other. So like how that form is turning, how they're coming out of the center and like folding over or under the other ones. I want to do just enough to describe that, but no more. I don't want to just be throwing lines down in there for the sake of throwing lines into it. I don't want it to get like spaghetti noodly, you know what I mean? Where it's just kind of like where I have so much linear texture in there that it just becomes chaotic. I do want kind of masses of feathers. I do want like, some of the lines to kind of fall into a mass where like, 3 or 4 of those individual little feathers kind of drop into a clump and then fold down and under, and then another piece kind of comes up and over. I want to get the most information with the fewest marks, I think is a good way to say it. So like the most that I can say with the least amount of line work in this piece in particular is what I'm thinking of. And that's another reason I think I'm moving so slowly and kind of methodically through this. Tell that I keep coming back down into those lower areas. So I did these kind of single pass lines down there, and I move up, and then I'm kind of looking back, and I'm trying to see like where I can sculpt lines, make them a little bit bolder or taper, like vary the line weight, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, where it really describes that one chunk of feather is folding over the other one, or making sure that the edge of it finishes super crisp and clean, stuff like that. And that's kind of fun in this. If you follow my work at all on Instagram or anywhere else, or if you've watched this show, normally I tend to do all of my clean, crisp, boldest lines at the end of my tattoos. So if it's a tattoo that I'm doing from scratch and it's not a rework, most of the time I'm barely lining on my first pass. I'm kind of coming through with really quick lines, or maybe even starting with a mag and not lining at all. I like to do my line work at the end. So this was a little bit of a change of pace for me, but it was fun just to get to come through and try to see like how much information can I get across with just, varying weights of lines. And so here we are at the end of the line work, and you can see how I did a few more lines than I probably should have, but it was enough for me to describe the shapes, the overall shapes. And now I can kind of squint down and look at it, and I can visualize what are going to be the dark masses and what are going to be the light masses. And it's already pretty well gotten rid of the kind of brick of an existing tattoo that was there. It was just this big chunky brick. And so just by coming through and separating those, it already looks 1,000 times better. So now I've switched over from my regular liner to a loose round shader, or a bigger, looser round configuration. And I'm just coming through, and I'm starting at the furthest back area, and I'm working forward. So all of my stuff that's in the farthest distance is going to be my darkest darks. And so that is my darkest dark that I'm putting in right there. And I'm just trying to think about, I don't want it to, you can tell with the amount of lines that are in there and what I'm doing right now, you can tell that if I got crazy with this, it would just turn into like complete chaos. It could end up with way too much going on if I were to, just shade out or black out every other
feather, it could turn into this really chaotic looking thing. So I'm trying to think about the masses, like big chunks of lighter areas and big chunks of darker areas. And I'm working from general to specific. So I want and the easiest way for me to do that, and I think for anyone, is to work from backwards from background to foreground. So the furthest areas back are going to be my darkest, and that's what I'm doing. And then we'll work into the foreground. You could probably get away with doing all this with a small mag or even a large mag kind of turned on its side. I've gotten to where I use these round shaders a decent amount. I don't really know why. I just I guess because I can make lines with them and do fills, but there's no right or wrong. If you don't use these kind of round shaders and you prefer mags, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. I used to try to work with the fewest possible needles. And I think that stems from, back when I started tattooing, we made our needles each day. So I wanted to work with the fewest number of needles because I didn't want to have to make, too many needles. So I worked basically with like 3 liners, 7 liners, and 7 mags, and that was about it. And then once we moved into where there were decent pre-made needles, I would use, I started to use larger mags. And then once we got into the world of cartridges, I started buying all kinds of stuff that I had never tried before. And now, with cartridges being whatever, $1 or $2 each, I don't hesitate to get out like 4 or 5 or 6 different cartridges. And sometimes I use all of them and sometimes I don't. But if I don't get them out, I won't use them. So I'll use way more. I have a much wider variety of needle configurations than I used to, just because they're so easy and cheap. Now, if I were doing 3 or 4 tattoos a day, I may not do that, but I only do 1 tattoo a day. So from one full 6 or 7 hour session, having 4 or 5 different needle configurations set out isn't overboard, I don't think. Right here, I'm starting to kind of that eye of the I guess you call it an eye of a peacock feather. It was shaped strangely to me, and so I kind of created this V shape under it so that it looks more like an upside down teardrop. And so I'm coming through and I'm really saturating. You can tell I'm kind of scumbling in. I'm saturating this black. I assume it's probably a black mixed with a dark purple or something like that. And I'm trying to really form like this dark kind of recess that eye will fall into. I want my like highest contrast area to be right there. That's the natural focal point of the entire piece is that eye. And I'm a little bit concerned at this point because I don't know how much I'm going to be able to brighten that thing up, like how far I'm going to be able to push it, because the colors that are in there, the existing colors are they're kind of dingy, and the skin was also fairly worked, like it had been beat up. So I wasn't super confident that I was going to be able to get these really super bright pops of color or really great, value contrast or, work from a muted tone to a bright tone. I just didn't know exactly what I was going to run into. So I'm trying to really saturate this area below it so that I can push that contrast as much as possible whenever I do get up into that eye of the feather. I just remember when I was doing this, thinking about that part of it, like looking at that centered part and just thinking like, man, I hope I can really get some strong, vibrant color and good contrast in that area. But it was pretty scarred. It was kind of beat up. Same thing here. I'm kind of coming through and really making some darks right around that eye of the feather. I had those 2, I don't know if you can see them, but they're on or if you know what I'm talking about, but on either side of the eye, there are these 2 completely hollow spots, these slivers that are kind of like on each side of the eye, and they're completely skin tone. So I knew that I needed those because that was my opportunity to really, to have some like unaffected skin that I could use, except for they were uneven. and a little bit wonky. So I was like, as I'm doing this stuff around the side of them, I'm thinking about how I can make them look a little more even. I wish I could highlight on this thing. How I could make them a little more even so that I could use them. They almost look like headphones on the side. I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about, but it's two little slivers of skin. And so I didn't want to make them dark. I wanted to use them. I thought I wanted to go from, since we have so many cool colors on the inside of that eye, I wanted to work out to like an orange or a warm tone. So I thought that was a perfect spot to be able to do that on each side, except for they're wonky. They're off from each other. And so I didn't want to accentuate that. And, that's just one of those things that you run into, and then you let it get in your head and you can't decide what to do. Become all indecisive and you're working around it and stressing about it. And that never goes away. And finally, you just bite the bullet and try something and hope it works. Getting out here towards the edges of the existing tattoo where they'll blend into the new parts of the tattoo is another area where I had to be really careful and make sure that I made some seamless kinds of transitions there, because otherwise it could easily look like you added onto a tattoo. And especially because the edges, those upper edges of the existing tattoo were where that real kind of porcupine-y, harsh stuff was happening. So I have to be really careful about how I'm blending that out to make sure that I'm using dark enough colors to actually blend it out where it looks seamless. The tendency is to kind of get light and try to wash it out, but then when it heals, all those old, dark, dingy colors want to like pull back through and you can see the old tattoo. In unsuccessful cover-ups, that's what I see more than anything, is people trying to use like lighter washes and wash these edges up and out, or wash away something, when really you just have to be bold and deliberate and careful, but bold and deliberate. Use strong color, strong values, and lead people's eyes out and away from those areas. See, I'm using some pretty darks right through here, and I just grabbed onto the edges or to the ends of some of these existing pieces, and I just led them out, and then I tried to turn them or twist them or make them interact with the piece next to them, and just basically wash them away by using them, by using the bold, strong, edges of those porcupine-looking shapes and like pulling them into a softer edge, an inch or two up the arm. So now these are those pieces that I was talking about. We're getting into some of the color now, and some of those where I'm trying to go from cool to warm as it moves out from the center of the eye. And this is really the most important area, just because it's the thing that people are going to notice the most. This and the edges, the very top and the very bottom, are where I want to be pulling people to. I want to get them away from the dingy inner parts of the tattoo. So I have to be careful here. I have to make sure that I'm using strong contrast and and making sure that it looks like it has volume and all that stuff, but then also making sure that it belongs with the rest of the tattoo, because, let's face it, we have kind of a dark and dingy tattoo. When this thing heals down, no matter how many layers of feathers I lay down, or how much color I drop in, or how much I push contrast, the mass of the tattoo is fairly dark. And if this centerpiece is too crazy and wild and bright, it doesn't look like it belongs in the same tattoo. So I have to either have to like dull the center down so that it belongs, or I have to take some of those bright colors from the center and have to pull them out, almost like they're making the rest of the feathers kind of glow, like they're shining light out. But if I were to just do the center of it bright and the rest of it dull, it would look out of place. So it's always it's a push and a pull. We're always compromising. It's always a compromise. Everything's a trade-off. If we want the center of this thing to be super bright, which now I've got some like bright turquoises or something that looks like, and I'm trying to, come in and get some really bold. Yeah, see, that's going to work right there. I could tell as soon as I did that. Get some bold kind of crisp color going. I have to make sure that it affects the areas outside of that eye as well. Watching as I'm laying this turquoise in, one of the most common issues I see with mainly, beginning tattooers or just artists in general is I've left that kind of highlight on the underside of the turquoise, but on the bottom. It's like the reflected light area if this were like a regular sphere. And a lot of times people will highlight that. It'll turn into almost like a stripe. And then it becomes this like crazy focal point, but really it should be in the shadow. If you're thinking of this eye as a sphere, it would be wrapping back, like at the bottom of that turquoise, it would be wrapping down and into the feather. So there's no way that light would be hitting it so strongly that it would jump out like it looks right now. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind. You want to make sure that you're not, that you're thinking about where the light's actually coming from and what that shape actually is, so you don't end up with these kind of undersides that should be in the shadows, like the underside of the sphere where it's wrapping back and under. It shouldn't be like the brightest point. And hopefully I addressed that. I can't really remember now that I'm saying it out loud. I probably screwed it up, but you can see what I'm talking about. It's really bright right there on the bottom, and it really shouldn't be. So my assumption is as I render this thing, I'll come through and I'll darken that a little bit. I'll use some other color, a more muted version of that turquoise, or maybe a muted version of that green or something, and I'll let that kind of roll back, so that it has the look of a sphere that's being lit from the top. See, and I think here what I'm trying to do is actually make that a little more round. The original shape was just bad. It just was this like wonky egg shape that wasn't even an egg. It wasn't, I don't even know what to call it. It was wrong in every way that it could be wrong. It was like bulbous in one area and flat in another area, and it just looked weird. And so I'm trying to come through and give the illusion that it's actually fairly symmetrical and fairly round. And you run into that, when you deal with reworking old tattoos or covering tattoos. It happens all the time, but it is crappy. If you didn't know, there are a lot of people out there doing tattoos that have no business doing tattoos, which is a perfect opportunity for me to say that, our show here is not in any way intended to replace an apprenticeship. Hopefully you're supplementing an apprenticeship, or, from my experience, and I know a lot of you guys who watch this show now, it's people who've been tattooing for a long time, who are just always looking to get a little better and to share ideas. And that's really what I think we've developed into. But if you are someone who is just getting into tattooing and you're watching these videos and trying to use them as some type of an apprenticeship, I can guarantee you it won't work. You have to have someone watching you, someone looking over you, watching what you're doing and helping you to make decisions in real time. This stuff, unfortunately, just does not translate. What you're learning from me in this video doesn't translate as easily as you would hope to you sitting down and trying to replicate it or do your own tattoo. So find someone that's been tattooing a while, someone you respect and that is easy to be around, and see if they'll help you out. There you go, that's coming together. I went from this kind of turquoise to more of a green, trying to push that contrast there, give a little bit of volume. My client almost fell out of the chair, I think. Moving into a little lighter and even brighter green. I've been using these bright, I don't know, they're called something different from each manufacturer, but it's like android green or graffiti green or goblin green or something like that, depending on the manufacturer. But they're glow in the dark greens. They're so crazy bright. And I found that I use them all the time. I mix them down with grays. I mix them into all different colors, but they're so bright they have to be toxic. I'm sure they're going to start killing people. Now, as I move into the lighter and brighter kind of end of the value scale here, I'm working in even lighter greens now. I typically do recommend working dark to light, especially if you're not super experienced. The danger in working all your light tones, and then I'm going to move up from here and I'm going to have more darks to put into that upper area, and I'm going to be wiping down into these, is it can pick up some of that dinginess. It can pick up some of that darker color. If the skin is overworked, if it's worked excessively, you can pick up some of that color and it can affect the healed tattoo a little bit. If the skin's not overworked, the worst case is it'll kind of affect your photo at the end of the tattoo. For the most part, the tattoo will heal fine. But I have seen it on occasion where, you have an area of light that's really overworked and then you wipe an area of dark over it and it ends up kind of like affecting it kind of picking up some of that dark color and making the tattoo dingy. So if you have any hesitation about it, just stay dark to light. I could always come back and do these highlights at the end. And look, I'm doing exactly what I said I shouldn't have. I'm using this super light, bright green on the bottom side, and I should have gone a little darker. That actually doesn't look too bad because I'm pulling it straight into the quill. I still probably could have touched it into a little bit of gray just to mute it down slightly. We'll be able to tell when we look at the healed tattoo. But typically, I would say that bottom ridge there should fold down into the feathers and give the illusion that eye is actually round, is actually a sphere. But there you go. I didn't do that. I went with a really light color on the bottom side. So I'm starting to pull those colors though. Like I said, if you're going to go really bright in the center and everything else is muted, you have to address those two things. Like you can't have this really bright thing in the center and everything else be completely muted. So I'm starting to grab those greens that I used in the eye and I'm pulling them up into those skin tone areas of the feathers, so that almost this glow kind of like bathes the immediate area surrounding the eye. One thing that I use a lot is this idea that like a really intense light or a really intense color, it's bright and it shines, but it dissipates really quickly. Whereas if you had, so let's say that you had like a light source, like a red light source that was just under your face and you were shining it up, and it might just catch all of the underside features of your face and light them bright red. But then when it got up to your hair or just past your head, it's basically gone. It dissipates really quickly. Where on the other hand, if that red light was 5 feet above you and it was shining down in the room, it would bathe the entire room in red. So like an ambient light can bathe the entire room, but a really intense light will be brighter, but it'll fall out faster. And I use that idea a lot in my tattoos and paintings and drawings and all that stuff, as a way to push people to the focal points. So right here I'm using that green, and you can see like I pulled the green, the same green that I used in the eye. I pulled it up and out, but it's going to fall out pretty quickly. See, here we go. Now I'm dropping some of those warm tones in. Well, you can tell, I think I muted this. This isn't like a straight orange or anything. I probably like dropped it into a complementary a little bit or into a gray, because I don't want it to compete with those super bright greens. So it's a little bit of what I bet it is. There's some solid, I think it's the solid ink color that I bought that it's like, it's not a burnt orange, but it's something like that. Let me see if I have it right here. It's Fusion. It's raw sienna. I bet that's what it is. I've dipped into this raw sienna. It's a cool color. It's a little bit muted, but still kind of bright. And then as it drops down, I'll warm it up a little bit more, drop it into some straight red or some brick red or something like that, so that it falls into that green on the bottom side that I probably shouldn't have done. Yeah, see, I went a little bit darker right here. I think you can tell. Yeah, see, it warmed up just a little bit more. So I went from that raw sienna to Probably just dipped it into some type of like straight red is what it looks like. Just trying to create a little like subtle transition from warm to cool, from intense to muted, all that stuff. And this is where that, as I'm, kind of framing this thing with this warm tone, this is where I'm running into the trouble of the wonkiness of the original tattoo and how it just wasn't very round right there in the center. So I can remember, the reason I bring this up is I can remember when I was doing this, fighting with this, and like the way that the reds were meeting in the middle and all that stuff I wasn't happy with, and still not completely happy with. I did end up having to compromise just a little bit, but it's way better than it started. So gotta keep that in mind. See this, I'm doing this little highlight on the top there, and I kind of offset it. I think that was an attempt at making it look like the wonkiness of the shape is deliberate, I think, instead of having the highlight set dead in the center. Now I'm grabbing a little bit of that warm tone and kind of pulling it out into the feathers as well, just in a few areas. And then my strongest, brightest green right here at the tip top, yellowy green. This is another version. I'll tell you what this one's called too. I have it right here. It's called, it is also a fusion color, neon yellow. It's like that graffiti green mixed with a regular yellow, atomic yellow or something like that. That's the thing about most of these colors. When you buy these like crazy colors, you'll find that you can make them with colors you already have 99% of the time, which I recommend doing until you find that you're constantly mixing them. And then in that case, you may as well just buy the bottle of it. So just pulling those greens up, and I'm trying to just see, I am stopping a lot and looking at it and trying to see how far can I push these things before they go too far. So, just like, this is one of those things you kind of have to feel out. Like I said, that a color is super intense, so you don't want it to go too far. It won't be as intense. The further that you let it carry, the less intense it'll look. So, I want to keep it kind of close to the eye here and let it dissipate, but exactly where that line is, you don't really know until you just kind of like start experimenting, and then, wipe it down and visualize. What I find myself doing all the time now is just like, what if it went another inch up, and just kind of picture what that would look like. We draw pictures all the time. We can visualize. It's not that hard. As we get to the home stretch here, last minute or two, I hope you guys have enjoyed your double IPAs as much as I have. And I hope that my ramblings haven't been too annoying or off topic. These are fun though. I don't know why I don't do these more often. We used to do them all the time when I first started this channel, and they just got to be kind of time consuming. But I enjoy them. I like to go back and kind of watch and second guess what I've done. All right, here's the finished piece. And, it worked well, really. I mean, I'm happy with it. She was happy with it. It settled in well. I'll try to get a healed photo. I do not have a healed and settled photo, but I have seen it. It did great. So a little before and after coming up. And thank you guys for supporting what we do. I really appreciate it, and hope you got something from this. Hey, thanks again for watching. Please be sure to like and comment and subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date with all of the things that we are doing. If you would like to buy us a drink, please support us on Patreon. There's a button somewhere around here that allows you to do that. You can also visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter so you know where we're headed and what we're doing. And while you're there, please check out our merchandise page. Buy yourself a fancy new Fireside t-shirt. Thank you for supporting the Fireside Tattoo Network, and we'll see you on the next episode.